Yes. Question asked and answered. Okay. All right. Well, I will turn it over to Allison, who is coming to us from metro.org and who gave a fantastic presentation at IIIF 2024 about the sort of questions about regulation of AI use of IIIF materials and why we might want to regulate it and what regulation might look like. So I will hand it over to Allison to take us away here.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you also to the facilitators of this meeting for the opportunity to present again on this topic. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen, and if y'all can just give me a thumbs up if you can see this, if it looks all right. Can you see the presentation? Good. Okay. So for those of you who are not aware, I had the opportunity to present on this topic at the the IIIF annual conference in early June that took place in Los Angeles. This presentation is called Creating a Better Balance, Respectful Reuse, and Machine Learning and AI Tags in IIIF Manifests. I'm presenting today, and I just want to note that this presentation was co-authored with my colleague at Metro, Diego Pino, who is also on the call today. Diego and I were fortunate enough to kind of hold sister presentations about this topic. I was at IIIF and Diego was at Open Repositories, presenting a similar version of the same talk with a little bit more of a DevOps and a tech spin on it. Okay. So what this proposal is about is using usage tags in IIIF manifests for kind of standardized no AI or regulated AI usage. We kind of model this off of language and standards based on other existing online creative communities, and also the license statement, licenses from rightstatement.org. And we kind of put together a proposal for how these could be implemented in IIIF manifests within the required statement property for humans and the rights property for machines. At this point, I do want to note that I want to be clear that this presentation is not about locking down all content that is being shared through IIIF manifests, or any kind of advocacy for censorship or not sharing your information resources, cultural heritage resources openly. As I said in the original presentation, I love sharing. I come from a big family. And I'm one of the younger members of the family, so I love the benefit of sharing my older sister's clothes, food that my family members have prepared. So please do not take away from this any kind of advocacy for not sharing or not providing open access to information and resources. Okay. So the background context for this and the motivation behind this and what we're seeing in our work in the shared digital landscape and digital repository space. As many of you are also seeing and already aware, we're living through a transformative era where the fundamental drivers of internet content creation, curation, and reuse are shifting in personal environments, in commercial environments, and in our professional realms for cultural heritage and libraries, archives, museums. The way that information is shared on the internet, content is shared on the internet, that is completely changed in the past few years. And this is primarily, a lot of these changes are due to the massive machine-powered applications, so machine learning and AI systems. They're reforming our shared digital landscape. And this unregulated consumption of data and resources by these machine-powered bots, harvesters, and other systems and mechanisms, that's making the serving of traditional open access digital library content, repository environment, that's becoming more tenuous. The way that we originally started sharing these in the earlier eras of the internet infrastructure, that's shifting a lot. We're seeing flooding and burdening of existing repository infrastructure, and all of this is challenging our well-established ideas of what openness really means. I'm going to go through what I call the parable of the flower to kind of put a little bit of a metaphorical spin on what it feels like to be living in this era, at least is how I see it. Let's say you have a dear friend who brings you a beautiful flower that they grew with great care and effort. They're beaming and proud. They bring it up to you and they say, hey, can you put this on display in your window facing the public square? I really want to share this with people. And you're like, absolutely, happy to share this. So you put that in the window, and you put it in a vase, and then you put a sign next to it, and it says, this flower is grown by my dear friend. And then immediately after that, a man with a big clunking machine scrambles up to your window, pries open the bottom of the window, and rips the flower out of the vase, and then stuffs it into a big machine's gaping mouth. And you're like, wow, that's not great. And then through a series of cutouts spaced along the side of that machine's body, you start to see this flower first get diced up to bits and then reassembled kind of at a smaller scale. And then that essentialized flower starts to move along through a series of scans, which you can't really see fully and you don't understand what's happening. So you ask the man, like, what's going on with that machine? He's like, don't worry about it. It's totally fine. And then the process pauses for a moment, and you see a different set of people come up to the side of the machine, and they start flipping switches up when the word flower appears on a small screen below a cutout on the side of the machine. You're like, what's that about? Then the man drops a few coins into the hands of those flip switchers, and the process moves forward. And then finally, this keeps happening just a little bit, and then at the end, the man pushes a button, and out pops an almost identical version of your friend's flower. And then your friend's original flower falls out the back of the machine, lands on the ground, and then the man with the machine continues on his way, ripping up other flowers, plants, anything that can be ripped out and stuffed into the machine's gaping mouth. And you see this process continue on. And your friend picks up their flower, and then they look up at you, and then you're left with the question, what do you do next? So kind of moving back to real world context, this isn't just a parable, of course. This is, in many ways, this is what it feels like to be a provider of digital resources in the new internet. And we have a lot of wonderful content that we're sharing in cultural heritage organizations, and it is being scraped, centralized, and stuffed into machine learning data sets, being used in these AI applications and tools in ways that we're not really sure about. It's completely non-consented, non-attributed, and it's like, what are we going to do from here? It doesn't feel great in some ways. All that said, I do want to take time to note that there are absolutely good uses and helpful positive outcomes for some machine learning and AI mediated tools and applications. There's some really wonderful, helpful applications of these technologies in our field and already, and of course outside our field in things like medical imaging and other kinds of imaging analysis in particular. Within our field, I think something particularly useful that will be particularly useful for us is transcription of audio and video content that we have that we don't possibly have the time to transcribe. There's lots of other exciting things that are kind of on the horizon that we could consider integrating, and we probably will over time. All that said, even though there's lots of good uses and helpful outcomes and cool tools and potential applications, I think there are definitely significant real world costs that we're going to need to consider. A lot of those real world costs that are driving these complex systems that we need to keep in mind, and I'm going to talk about them briefly. Don't want to take too much time about it, but costs, environmental costs, human costs, and institutional and organization costs. One thing I also want to note at this point is that as we hear about a lot of AI and machine learning technologies in general, non-professional circles or even within professional circles, one thing we need to keep in mind is that these systems they're always designed, deployed, implemented by humans. The biggest systems, the biggest applications are being designed with intent by large for-profit corporations and commercial industries. And that's all well and good. Their businesses, they have a very different perspective on cultural heritage information, on resource sharing, on data privacy, on all sorts of practices. And their main goal is to sell us things. And those things happen to be technology tools and services. But they look at that from a very different perspective and a very different set of values than ones that we have, or at least we aspire to have in our field. Okay, so moving forward to talk a little bit about the costs associated with machine learning and AI. There are a few slides following this that break down these different categories more in full. I'm not going to go into all of them today, but I do want to note that because these are huge topics, honestly, you could do a single talk or a single discussion focused solely on the environmental impacts, and you could drill down further into all of these. So the three main categories: environmental, human, institutional, organizational. All of those have separate slides and with a little bit more description. And then also underneath each slide in the speaker notes, there are references that kind of back up some of those points. One thing I want to talk about on this particular slide in the middle, because I won't have time to go through the one focus on human impact, is that this is a real photograph from the Dadaab refugee complex in Kenya. So one of those human impacts that is overlooked. In the parable that I described earlier, these are the flip switchers. Underlying all of the machine learning and AI applications is the use of exploitative ghost work and micro work, principally in areas of the global south and refugee communities. The Dadaab refugee complex in Kenya, for example, is home to Amazon Mechanical Turk workers and other subcontractors for large companies, including Microsoft and OpenAI and Meta. Okay, so the next one, even though I won't go through all individually, I will go through this one in particular related to the environmental impacts associated with AI and machine learning. For anyone who's not aware, this past Sunday was, according to most sources that monitor these kinds of things, the hottest day on record in recorded human history this past Sunday. So in an era where we're kind of thinking about climate change and trying to reduce our environmental impact, it's hard to ignore the real environmental costs associated with developing, building, maintaining, and using these machine learning and AI tools. Okay, so this image here on the left, this is from a 2019 study out of the University of Massachusetts, where they took some data provided by certain large tech companies, just a few, not all of them. Not all of large tech companies provide this kind of information for researchers to study, but they had access to some, and they computed some of the energy consumption requirements for training an AI model. Now, this is from 2019, and this figure here reflects the average carbon output required to train a single AI model. When they say train an AI model, they generally mean running through that once or twice, not what we typically see in actual real-world applications. We know that some of these large companies noted here will train models hundreds of times, thousands of times even. So this figure right here, where training a single AI model uses or requires the energy usage that is equivalent to some very carbon intensive practices, including an entire average lifespan of a US citizen for 1 year, this is probably lower than what it really is in today's models. And for some companies that don't submit their data online, including companies outside of North American, European, African, and South American context. So I'm talking a lot of companies are not represented at all, or this is lower than what it would be. related to that. A more recent study from November 2023 put out by the International Energy Agency, which is a reporting agency that collects data from large companies. This is using data provided directly by Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. This study showed that between 2017 and 2021, so following up a little after this one, the main providers of the commercially available cloud computing, their electricity usage more than doubled. There's more recent as in later 2024 studies that are showing that there's countries, including the United States, that are delaying shutting down very high carbon producing coal plants to continue to be so that the electricity grid, at least in the US context, can continue to provide electricity for some of these big companies, data centers, and then a large factor in this is the machine learning and AI sectors of big tech companies. I don't know if any of you happen to see a recent interview with Bill Gates or read about it, where he said that he's advocating for the development of additional nuclear plants in the United States to provide electricity for specifically for supporting AI technologies. Cool. This image in the middle is from a 2023 study that discussing the water usage required for the development and maintenance of machine learning and AI capabilities and systems at big tech companies. And this study shows, or they calculated that as of like 2022, 2023, so before kind of even wider adoption that you have right now. The average machine learning AI sector of big tech companies are using the same amount of water annually as 4 to 6 small European or African countries, averaging a population of about 5 million. So we are diverting potable fresh water that could be used to supply fresh water to about 20 to 30 million people to develop these tools. I'm gonna just go through the other slides again. If you're interested in diving a little bit deeper on those topics, please revisit them, look through the speaker notes and the references at the end. Just something that we should all be thinking critically on, those costs. Okay, one last note on this slide that I think about related to these technologies. I do think that there's an opportunity for us to consider professionally how the boom in AI and machine learning is analogous to past tech trends. Things like such as there's an app for that. I remember when everybody thought we were all going to have robots that poured us coffee in the morning and things like that. And also general consumer goods overconsumption trends. I kind of think of a lot of the applications I see of AI and everything now, fridges, or I think the latest version of Adobe PDF Reader has AI assistant in it. I think of that kind of the Stanley mugs trend or the specialty ice cubes tray trend that was part of consumer goods overconsumption. And I think we have to be a little bit more mindful in professional realms before we start adopting and implementing AI and machine learning tools in repository environments, in interfaces that we use and develop in our systems, and then also in how we think about we're making our resources available online. Are there ways that we can kind of regulate the usage and consumption of these by machines and bots and harvesters in ways that are more ethical with all these considerations that we have? Okay, so back to our parable and our community. Where we're at right now is that many people in our cultural heritage community, their members, the individuals who are producing and maintaining and curating content, they're holding their flowers, which is their hard work, their creative outputs, their research reports, their other intellectual endeavors. They're looking at us in the library, archives, museum space, and they're asking us, what are we going to do next? So what we think we should do we think we should consider and respond with care in this moment. We have the opportunity to act differently than commercial enterprises, corporations, and we can differentiate ourselves. We can set our own rules and standards, and we can ask them to be followed, and we can put them into practice, and we can stay on top of things and think of how we can maintain a better balance here. One thing I want to just reflect on right now is I want you to think about the difference, just yourself, perusing the general open internet, maybe looking for articles and or something, or doing online shopping even, and think about the difference in that experience versus going to a really well developed, maintained library, digital collection site, a repository site, or other kind of curated spaces that we see, and the interaction differences there. So this isn't really, it's not really crazy to say that we don't have to follow the same model that you see in general online commercial spaces or non-professional spaces, I guess you would say. It's okay if we kind of go our own path in this way. It's not like we're going to be left behind. It's all right. We can be a little different, and that's totally fine. Okay, so getting back to what we think we should do, and one way we could do that. One way we could have that better balance between the adoption of these tools and usage of our materials. We would like to propose the implementation of standardized no AI or regulated AI tags, in particular in IIIF manifests. These could be applied in all kinds of repositories. This is, again, similar to initiative crafted by other content communities in efforts to limit the scraping of images and text using tags, meta HTML tags. There's other mechanisms. We'll talk about that in a little bit. We propose that the IIIF community could consider implementing them within the standard IIIF API frameworks, and we think that this could help better regulate machine learning AI, content scraping, and non-consented or attributed use of these IIIF resources. So originally during the IIIF annual, this proposal said that the submitted was for a few different versions of these tags or usage statements, again, modeled after the DeviantArt and rightstatements.org existing kind of tags, and then the licenses, where they're not really licenses, they are rights statements from rightstatements.org, and broke them into a few different categories. No AI for no image or textual usage at all, no image AI, no image-based, ML, but textual metadata, OCR transcript use is okay, or if it was a textual document, that's fine, but maybe there's a figure in a particular object that you wouldn't want to use, like a figure as in an image. And then regulated AI usage. So usage is permitted, but you need to attribute this, and then usage is also permitted, but you need express written consent beforehand, and you also have to maintain attribution. So put forth a proposal to use these within the required statement property for human readability, and then the rights property for machines. And then just something to consider that we all need to keep in mind is the simple use cases where you apply per manifest versus more complex use cases where you maybe apply that item per item or canvas for differentiated uses. So I'm just going to show real quick an example of these tags if they were put in use within a IIIF manifest. This is a screenshot from the Mirador viewer, and you can see like here's a potential statement, and then you have a license or like a local rights statement. These could be worked in alongside your other existing rights statements. These are not meant in any way to replace your standardized statements or local rights and usage statements. They're meant to complement that. These are the original statements as proposed. You can see when I get to talking about the follow-up work completed after the conference, that these look a little bit different, but this is generally, the same kind of setup. Okay, so following the conference, I got to work preparing a IIIF cookbook recipe related to all of this. I'm going to go over to that in just a second. This link here, I just want to know it says preview. That is because this recipe was submitted, but it is not officially accepted and approved. It needs to go through that full process with the cookbook editors. I believe they're having a meeting. I don't know if they'll have time to discuss this particular recipe, but just know they have a meeting coming up in sometime in August, I believe. So just, be on the lookout for what happens related to that. This slide also contains a link to the GitHub pull request. If you can please review and share your feedback, that would be great. Thank you so much to everybody who has already looked at that and provided feedback. And thank you to everyone who was on the IIIF cookbook calls that I participated in, and for your feedback and notes shared there. That was very helpful. I really appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to go over to the recipe in just a second, but I just want to talk through a couple things about the current limitations of the rights and required statement properties themselves within IIIF. And again, I just want to note here that there is already precedence in standardized rights statements, licenses, and general usage and access statements to have overlap and nuanced combinations. Okay, so going over to this preview of the recipe as it stands right now, a couple things I want to note. For the rights property, this in the IIIF API is for the machinable URIs for rights. Right now, URIs should be sourced from Creative Commons or rightstatement.org. For URIs that don't reference either of those standardized sources, there's something called the extensions mechanism, which allows you to use URIs that are also found in the IIIF registry of known extensions that to source your URIs, and Wikidata is included in the profiles registry. All that said, I have longer term plans as noted in this ethical machine learning AI usage tags project repository to develop stable dereferenceable URIs. And once those URIs are developed and put in place, I will, if this recipe is approved, I would seek out to update this recipe to use those. And I would also then submit another proposal to add them to the rights registry for IIIF. The rights registry right now, and this is all of this comes up in the GitHub issue if you actually go over and look at it. The rights registry right now is a work in progress and is going to be probably submitted by another member of the IIIF community as for an update soon. One thing I also wanted to note about the rights registry and the kind of limitation of the current rights property in IIIF to only use Creative Commons or rightstatement.org is that there are other standardized rights and usage statements out there, such as local context, traditional knowledge labels, that maybe we could also consider, or someone could put forth a proposal considering implementation or allowing URIs from those sources. Okay, and this is an important note. So aside from providing a link reference to a static web page that describes a licensor statement in greater detail, a machinable outcome of the usage of the rights property is the display of the corresponding licensor statement icon or badge within one of the standard IIIF viewers. If you look at the recipe example shown below and you open it up in Mirador, you can see there's a little CC icon that pops up that corresponds with the included CC statement. In the future, hopefully there could be other ways to extend the machinable outcomes associated with these machine learning and AI usage tags and statements or other rights values in ways that direct responses to machine-mediated interactions. There are other projects already in the works that are doing this. In particular, one that kind of crossed our radar. Hold on, I'm searching for the link for it right now. I was just discussing with Diego this morning, the data diligence project. So hold on, let me drop a link to that in just a second. Here we go. This project, I'm not wholesale endorsing that project. I'm just noting it as something that came across the radar today. And then also just thinking of, in general, IIIF is a set of APIs, and through APIs, you can direct machine-mediated interactions in a variety of ways. So there is a potential for having no AI, these regulated AI statements, lead to some kind of machinable interaction in the future. We can talk more about that in detail after finishing this presentation, if anyone has questions about like potential ideas for that. Okay, so going through that, here's the right statements. These are Wikidata items that correspond to each of these usage statements or tags. And then within the required statement property, these are examples of what these tags could look like in that human readable format. Talk here about some considerations to use. I'm not going to go through this because I'm going to flip back to the presentation in just a second to talk about them. But I did just want to open this up in Mirador so you can get a picture of it. I did ask Glenn if it was okay, because I'm pretty sure he's the author of this original picture, if I could use this, and he said yes. So this is an example. Again, there's that. This is the statement itself is paired with the other right statement that was present already. So you can see how it could be potentially complementary. But again, getting back to some of the issues associated with this, I wouldn't say issues, but just something for us all to consider. The IIIF 3.0 specs, they restrict rights to a single value string format, which makes sense for a machinable URI and any potential machine-mediated interactions that could be facilitated through that. You probably want that to stay singular. Required statement itself is also limited to a single value JSON object. That is interesting in the sense that the human readable statement can only have a single value. So it might look a little funky depending on how you structure your data. Even outside of the context of these particular AI or machine learning tags or usage statements, just thinking about how it's a little difficult in IIIF manifest right now to have both a standardized right statement in required statement, the human readable one, and your local right statement, and pairing those together in the ways that people can do that. So I think that's an area of the specs that could be explored as well. But that is for another presentation, another topic, and of course, wider community discussion, all of this. So I'm going to go back to the slides for a second. So again, please look at the GitHub pull request, share your feedback and any recommendations or questions. And yeah, thank you again to everybody who related to the IIIF Cookbook repository for their guidance and help on that so far. Okay. There we go. The other part of this work that I've been going through post-conference is establishing the ethical machine learning and AI usage project repo on GitHub. And I outlined a few basic remaining 2024 into early 2025 work plans. The next task area that I would like to follow up on is the creation of JSON LD and RDF versions of the statements. I'm going to put those together following along a similar setup outlined in the writestatements.org, the requirements for technical infrastructure document. You can see kind of the setup that they have there, how they model the statements, what they think about them, and that's a wonderful resource, a wonderful project. It's really sound, and they've already outlined, of course, a lot of the issues and the potential usage considerations within cultural heritage libraries and archives. So that's the next step in the plan. And then using these to provide those stable URIs, development and maintenance. Also going to do continued outreach, presentation and collaboration plans. They're in progress. And if you look at that project repo, we'll share more information about that as we go through them. Next up, just wanted to go through some key takeaways related to all of this. So IIIF is an API-based framework. It's geared towards machine-mediated interactions, but at the end of the day, I think we can all mostly agree that IIIF resources are for humans. Use of these tags in manifest is always going to need to be paired with sophisticated, up-to-date DevOps and data security practices. I'm an analogy person, so I'm sorry, I'm going to share another analogy. Sometimes what it feels like now with all the crazy machine learning and AI scraping that's happening in our repositories, it's kind of like we have a bridge, we've been letting people cross it to go into the public square for many years, and now it kind of feels like there's a troll that's under the bridge that's sending armies of other trolls across the bridge, and then at the end they're handing us the bill for the tolls, and then they're also at the same time building a bridge that looks just like ours in a weird version of the same public square, and then we're just like kind of hanging out. So we're in this kind of strange space right now. I know. So I think the DevOps and data security practices, that is a separate area of discussion and consideration for us all to keep in mind. And that's going to be a fast moving thing that's hard to keep track of and change. But what we can do to complement the work of DevOps and data security is consider our own curatorial legacies and the complex nature of our content. And we can think about how we can kind of practically mark up the usage for some of our materials in meaningful ways, actionable ways. I think another thing we all need to keep in mind is that we have to keep a watchful eye on all the new and evolving machine learning and AI lawsuits and government regulations that are coming out across the globe. One thing I talked about during the original presentation was consideration for how we are going to have to manage anything that could be in our libraries and archives that could be considered biometric data. So if we have really high resolution photographs that maybe, it sounds crazy, but the technology is crazy. If high resolution photographs that maybe potentially show an iris imprint of someone, or oral history interviews and video oral history interviews, is that going to be considered biometric data? Because there are machine learning and AI tools that can take small amounts of video and voice recordings and then generate mimics of those. Like that's something we should definitely keep an eye on. There's already a few states within the United States that have rules for organizations that have biometric data that host it, that provide access to it, and there's also legislation in place that if an individual thinks that their biometric data is any way compromised, they can litigate with you. So I think we need to keep that in mind. There's also within wider online community, we have to think about there's going to be different regulations in different parts of the world, and we're going to need mechanisms similar to the differences already in place for providing access to content within the United States versus Europe, for example. That's going to continue to happen, and we're going to have ways that we can provide access to our content in different ways as needed. And the last note kind of goes without saying, but all of this technology is going to shift over time, and it's going to require diligent application and monitoring for the rest of our professional lives. Yeah. So I'm going to end the same way I ended at the IIIF conference. I'm sorry I spoke for a long time. I do want to leave time for questions, but I just want to leave with these quotes from the book Unmasking AI by Dr. Joy Buolamwini. She's a computer scientist from MIT, and she's the founder of the Algorithmic Justice League. So yeah, I'm going to just leave off with that and turn it back over to Emma to facilitate any questions that might have come up.
Thank you so much, Allison. This was amazing as expected, and a lot of exciting work that you've done since LA. So that's great. Yeah, any initial questions from anybody? Feel free to raise your hand, or it's a small enough group that you can probably just speak out. And if you're unable to speak, just put them in the chat and I will relay them.
I have some very noisy children in the background, so I might need to switch to chat. We'll see. But just a comment rather than a question, Allison. This is a fabulous contribution, and I missed the IIIF talk because I was at Open Repositories enjoying Diego's talk. But I think this is a wonderful contribution. Thank you. And I love all your analogies. And that book that Diego also recommended in his talk is really good. And I would recommend that everybody read that from cover to cover.
Thanks, Yanthi. That is a wonderful book, as is Algorithms of Oppression and Weapons of Mass Destruction. They're wonderful resources.
Hi, I'm Ellen. I have a question. I'm from Europe. So we have GDPR, TDM, exceptions, etc. And we use a lot of right statements in the collections. And I was wondering, like, you're talking about a new right statement, or how do you see this on the human readable side of things?
I see them as complementing rightstatement.org. Because rightstatement.org, they originally developed kind of prior to the age of or the kind of the massive wave of machine learning and AI applications. And I think that rightstatement.org and Creative Commons, they weren't originally developed with these potential usage applications in mind and what would come next. So I had the opportunity last November to speak at a Creative Commons meeting in New York City discussing this there was a multi-day event, and the second day they were discussing how Creative Commons licenses might apply in certain machine learning and generative AI contexts, and the way that they have been kind of thinking about them from an organizational standpoint and the way that they could be applied. It remains to be seen from the perspective of Creative Commons how they think they might apply. Rightstatement.org. Also, there's a couple important things to know. Creative Commons, they in their specifications, they outline themselves as an actual license statement. And Creative Commons licenses say that once they are applied, they can never be revoked. Rightstatement.org does not make that designation, and they consider themselves to be rights statements. So statements that can be used to convey the usage, rights, and access of materials. So they're different than Creative Commons. So I feel like rightstatement.org, a lot of the statements themselves are very straightforward, and they're very complementary to local rights usage, and then additional statements for usage, such as machine learning in AI applications.
So if I understood it well, you proposed to add a new right statement to the 12 statements, like a 13th statement. How do you?
At this time, we have been thinking of them as distinct from rightstatement.org, but there are plans to do more outreach to rightstatement.org. That organization, which has done amazing work, they and they're very widely used statements. They have a very different process for creating new statements and moving forward with them. I think the last time that they met was also 2021, but don't quote me on that. So it's a little different.
My concern would be, from my perspective, if you put a no AI opt-out in the European legislation, the opt-out can only be done by the rights holder. So you can only put a no AI statement on content of which you are the creator or you hold the rights. So this it's the scope and the applicability actually of the no AI, because how can you cannot opt out for another rights holder. So we've been struggling a lot with this issue, like should we go via like collective management organizations or whatever? But the problem is that the opt-out legally in Europe, we have an opt-out under the Article 4 of the DSM for commercial AI, but the opt-out needs to be done by the right holder. So as a cultural heritage institution, we can only opt out from content that we've created, not the content that is in our collections, because we don't have the rights on that content. So this is, if you put a IIIF statement like no AI on content that is not your content, I'm not sure how legally binding this could be. And I'm not, probably because you're in the US context, maybe this is different for you guys.
It is different. But I think this touches on a wider issue related to all rights statements and usage statements that we have for content that's online. I once worked at an organization where the IT manager said to us flat out, if you don't want somebody to reuse your content, don't put it online.
Yeah.
You know, like there's almost, it's very hard to regulate things that are online in all countries. And I think that it's interesting to me that within libraries, museums, archive, cultural heritage organizations, that we so much go along with what commercial entities say, in the sense that we're like, nobody consulted or thought about, like, came to cultural heritage organizations, libraries, archives, museums, and said, can we use your content? Why do we have to opt out? Why don't we have to opt in? You know, and then why are we kind of going along, following the measures of like large companies saying, yep, anything that's online we have access to, we can use it however we want, and you can't say anything about it, and we're going to make these convoluted rules that you have to follow. So I don't know, that I appreciate you bringing up the particular roles within
So my question was,
European.
you would still propose to use these tags on content that you don't have the rights to, like really on your collection material?
No. Okay. So the one thing that we didn't talk about in this is particular use cases. Where would you want to use these tags?
Okay.
Or why would you want to use these? So we have a lot of content in our repositories that was created well before sharing online was a thing. And a kind of, I called it a cheeky example of material that I came across in a repository for a partner that we were managing. I was just happened to be looking for something, a thesis related to art or something, you know, to use an example in a training that we were doing. And there was a thesis which was written in the 70s. It was originally hand typed. And then there was photographs in it that were actually, like, I could tell from the digitized version that they were photographs that were like, you know, like pasted into this piece of paper that was scanned. And it was a thesis written by an artist for a particular work. And the photographs featured nude photos of all of her friends. And, you know, that's a cheeky, silly example, but is that material really suitable for machine learning and data sets? Other examples that we've come across are, for just bear in mind where you might want to consider usage of these kinds of tags, are images depicting First Nations persons in the United States being led along being relocated, moved from reservation to reservation. There's photographs of that. Is that suitable? Or images depicting actions of war, harm,
I totally
things
agree
like
on
that.
My only question is how yeah, can you do this? I understand the reasoning, but can we impose this? Do we have legal ground to do so? That's my only. Can we? Yeah, I'm
I
not
think
sure. I think the idea is very good, but I'm not sure how in practice you can say as a cultural institution we have the right to say it's not. So that's the only. I'm not sure what the best practices around this.
Yeah, I think that's a wider question than any kind of rights or usage statement could follow on. I think litigation is always going to keep changing on this. But I think that if we think that we have the right to put something up online, then why would we not also have the ability to say, hey, this contains culturally sensitive information or data that might not be a good fit for machine learning and AI applications. Or if you're going to use this, we ask you to apply consent. We're also taking a big risk legally in the sense that a lot of our institutions have put up materials that we never had consent to originally by the original creators of the content. I would say the vast majority of our content, we never had a right. We never had the explicit rights of the original content creator to share.
That's why we use the right statements.
Because it leaves it open.
Can I just jump in here, because we only
yeah.
have a few minutes left. This is a great discussion, but I wanted to just ask you, Allison, and maybe sort of prompt the group at large to think about what we as a group can do to support your work, and particularly the cookbook recipe, the potential changes to the IIIF API in the next specification. Do you have any thoughts on what that might look like? We could have a little working group. We could just solicit reviews of the pull request as you've already done.
I think that would be helpful, the reviews on the pull request. I think continuing to have internal discussions to think about how and why we might want to apply kind of usage tags or statements to certain materials that we have, and keep considering that and keep discussing it. In the future, we will be continuing to present and to reach out to different existing organizations to collaborate on this topic. And some sample cases, or yes, or other materials or things, use cases where you're like, I'm not really sure of materials in your repositories where you think this might be applicable and why, developing kind of practices and guidelines is something that's in progress in multiple organizations and systems and communities already in our professional field about like guidance on these. Thinking in the US context, the Association of Research Libraries and like the development of practices and standards that they're working on. I'm also part of the IIIF, the International Consortium of Library Councils Metadata Task Force. We're talking about this topic there as well. Yeah. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. I think we can certainly continue to, or we can use the Machine Learning IIIF Slack channel if anybody wants to continue the discussion or have examples or other things they find in the wild that we want to consider. But yeah, I think this is a really important, an important question, and something that we could certainly put our minds to some tangible outputs or help you to continue the tangible outputs you've already created.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you all. Stay tuned for details about our next call, which will be in September. But yeah, we'll see you all on Slack before then.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.